Number 8. Beech nut. Beech nut has been one of America's most recognizable baby food companies for generations, making its appearance here especially surprising. The reason isn't that every beech nut product is problematic, it's that the company became a central focus of congressional scrutiny regarding heavy metal testing practices, and, in 2021, also recalled certain infant rice cereal products because testing found inorganic arsenic levels above the FDA's guidance level. Those events understandably raised questions among parents about sourcing, testing, and quality control. Here's why that matters. Parents expect baby food companies to operate with exceptionally wide safety margins, not merely to meet minimum regulatory expectations.
Now, it's important to keep this in perspective. The presence of heavy metals in baby food doesn't necessarily mean they were intentionally added. Many crops absorb trace amounts of these elements from soil and water, making this an agricultural challenge as much as a manufacturing one. However, companies can reduce exposure by carefully selecting suppliers, testing ingredients and finished products, and avoiding higher-risk raw materials where practical. That's exactly why transparency matters so much. Read the label, but also read the company's safety commitments. Parents shouldn't have to guess whether a manufacturer is aggressively working to reduce contaminants or merely responding after public scrutiny forces action.
Beech nut has publicly stated that it strengthened its testing and sourcing practices following these events, and today's products may differ significantly from those that drew earlier criticism. That's encouraging, but consumer trust, once shaken, takes time to rebuild. When you're feeding infants, expectations are understandably higher than almost any other food category. That's why beech nut begins our countdown. This ranking reflects historical concerns, transparency expectations, and consumer confidence, not a claim that every current product is unsafe. Parents deserve companies that continually demonstrate they are reducing avoidable risks, rather than simply assuring consumers everything is fine. Number 7. Gerber. Few names are more closely associated with baby food than Gerber. For generations, its iconic baby logo has symbolized trust for millions of parents. But here's why brand recognition alone isn't enough. Gerber was also among the companies examined during the congressional investigation into heavy metals in baby food, prompting widespread public concern and increased scrutiny of industry testing practices. Since then, the company has emphasized expanded testing and quality improvements. Even so, many parents continue asking the same question. How much transparency should we expect from the companies feeding our youngest children? And that's where our investigation becomes even more revealing.
Now, here's why Gerber ranks slightly ahead of beech nut. Gerber has invested heavily in research, manufacturing, and quality assurance over many decades, and the company has publicly stated that it's strengthened its ingredient sourcing and testing protocols following increased public scrutiny. That's a positive step. But here's the problem. Parents shouldn't have to rely solely on company statements when choosing food for their babies. Trust is built through transparency, consistent testing, and openly communicating how contaminants are reduced over time. Read the label, then go one step further. Ask what the company is doing before the product reaches the shelf. That's the question every parent deserves answered.
Another important lesson from our investigation is that baby food safety isn't determined by a single ingredient or a single test result. Rice, sweet potatoes, carrots, and certain fruit juices can naturally absorb higher amounts of some environmental contaminants, depending on where they're grown. That doesn't mean parents should avoid nutritious foods altogether. It means variety matters. Pediatric nutrition experts often recommend offering babies a wide range of foods instead of relying heavily on one ingredient every day. That changes everything. Instead of asking whether one jar is good or bad, parents should ask whether the overall diet helps reduce repeated exposure while providing balanced nutrition. Gerber also demonstrates how powerful branding can become. Generations of families recognize the logo instantly, creating a level of trust few companies ever achieve. But trust should always be reinforced by continuous improvement. The companies leading this category shouldn't simply comply with regulations. They should strive to exceed them whenever possible. Babies represent the most vulnerable consumers in the grocery store. Expectations should reflect that reality. That's why Gerber lands at number 7. The company has taken meaningful steps to improve, but today's parents increasingly expect greater openness about sourcing, contaminant reduction, and quality control than previous generations ever demanded.
Number 6. Parents' Choice Baby Food. Walmart's private label baby food is often chosen because of its affordability, allowing families to stretch their grocery budgets without sacrificing convenience. Price matters, especially for parents purchasing multiple pouches and jars every week. But here's why affordability isn't the only factor worth comparing. Private label products often rely on manufacturing partners, making it less obvious to consumers exactly where ingredients originate and how testing standards compare across suppliers. That's not automatically a sign of poor quality. However, it does make transparency even more important. Parents should know not only what's inside the pouch, but also how consistently those ingredients are monitored before reaching store shelves.
Now, let's be fair. Store brands frequently meet the same regulatory requirements as national brands, and many perform very well during routine quality testing. Our concern isn't that private label products are inherently inferior. It's that limited public information can make independent comparisons more difficult for consumers trying to evaluate sourcing and testing practices. Read the label. Then ask whether the manufacturer provides meaningful information about contaminant reduction, supplier standards, and ingredient testing. When companies communicate openly, parents can make decisions with greater confidence instead of relying almost entirely on price and packaging. That's the level of transparency this category should strive for.
Parents' Choice earns a middle position because it provides accessible nutrition for many families while leaving room for greater public transparency regarding ingredient sourcing and quality assurance. Here's why that matters. Parents buying baby food aren't simply purchasing convenience, they're purchasing trust. Every spoonful represents confidence that the manufacturer has done everything reasonably possible to reduce avoidable risks. The strongest brands understand that responsibility extends beyond regulatory compliance. It includes communicating clearly, responding quickly to emerging science, and continually improving production practices. Those are the qualities that separate acceptable products from truly exceptional ones.
Number 5. Plum Organics. At first glance, Plum Organics appears to offer exactly what many modern parents are searching for: organic ingredients, colorful packaging, and a strong emphasis on fruits, vegetables, and developmental nutrition create an appealing image of wholesome baby food. Organic certification can certainly reduce exposure to some agricultural chemicals, but here's the problem. Organic doesn't automatically mean free from naturally occurring environmental contaminants, such as lead or arsenic. Those elements exist in soil regardless of whether crops are grown using conventional or organic farming methods. That's why ingredient sourcing and testing remain just as important as certification labels. Plum Organics deserves credit for publicly discussing quality standards and efforts to improve ingredient sourcing over time. That's encouraging, and transparency should always be recognized when companies engage openly with consumers. Even so, our investigation found that parents sometimes place too much confidence in a single word printed on the front of the package. Read the label, but don't stop there. Learn how the company selects ingredients, what testing programs it uses, and how it responds when new scientific evidence emerges. Organic is one important piece of the puzzle. It isn't the entire picture. And from this point forward, every remaining brand distinguished itself through an even stronger overall commitment to ingredient quality, transparency, or sourcing philosophy. Number 4. Earth's Best Organic. Earth's Best has long positioned itself as a brand focused on organic ingredients and early childhood nutrition. That immediately appeals to parents looking for fewer synthetic pesticides and a simpler ingredient philosophy. During our investigation, we found that the company has emphasized quality sourcing and compliance with evolving safety standards. That's encouraging, but here's why it stops at number 4. Organic certification alone doesn't answer every question parents should ask. Read the label. Organic farming can reduce exposure to certain agricultural chemicals, but it doesn't automatically eliminate naturally occurring environmental contaminants, such as arsenic or lead, that may already exist in soil. That's why transparency and ongoing testing remain just as important as certification itself. Now, here's what Earth's Best does well. The company offers a broad variety of fruits, vegetables, grains, and developmental stages, making it easier for parents to provide dietary diversity. That matters because pediatric nutrition experts generally encourage introducing babies to a wide range of foods, rather than depending heavily on a single ingredient every day. Variety doesn't eliminate contaminants, but it can help avoid repeatedly relying on foods that may naturally accumulate higher levels of certain elements, depending on where they're grown. The real issue isn't finding a perfect baby food. It's choosing companies that continually improve sourcing, monitor ingredients carefully, and communicate openly with parents, instead of relying solely on reassuring marketing language. Earth's Best also reminds us that convenience and nutrition don't have to compete with each other. Ready-to-eat baby food serves an important purpose for busy families, especially when fresh, homemade meals aren't always practical. The companies earning higher positions in our rankings aren't necessarily those making dramatic advertising claims. They're the ones demonstrating a stronger commitment to ingredient transparency, continuous improvement, and helping parents understand what's inside every pouch or jar. That changes everything. Trust shouldn't come from colorful packaging or familiar logos. It should come from consistent quality standards, backed by meaningful information parents can actually evaluate before making a purchase. Number 3. Once Upon a Farm. This brand has attracted attention by focusing on refrigerated baby food made with organic fruits and vegetables while emphasizing minimal processing. Unlike many shelf-stable products, refrigeration allows the company to preserve freshness without relying on the same processing methods required for long pantry storage. Here's why that matters. Every manufacturing approach involves trade-offs, but minimizing processing where practical may help preserve the original characteristics of ingredients. More importantly, the company has built much of its reputation around transparency regarding sourcing and quality practices. That's exactly the direction many parents say they want the baby food industry to move. Now, refrigeration alone doesn't automatically make a baby food superior. Safety still depends on careful sourcing, hygienic manufacturing, cold chain management, and rigorous quality control. That's an important distinction. Marketing often encourages consumers to focus on one impressive feature while overlooking the complete picture. Read the label. Ask where the ingredients come from. Ask how they're tested. Ask whether the company explains its quality program in language parents can actually understand. Once Upon a Farm impressed us because it combines ingredient simplicity with a willingness to communicate more openly about how products are made. In an industry built on parental trust, that openness carries significant weight. Number 2. Serenity Kids. Serenity Kids earned one of the highest positions in our investigation because it approaches baby nutrition differently from many traditional brands. Instead of focusing primarily on fruit-based pouches, much of its product line emphasizes vegetables, healthy fats, and protein-rich ingredients, while avoiding added sugars in many formulations. That philosophy aligns with recommendations to expose children to a wider variety of flavors early in life, rather than relying almost exclusively on naturally sweet foods. Just as importantly, the company provides detailed information about ingredient sourcing and quality standards. Read the label, then read the company's explanations. Transparency isn't just about listing ingredients, it's about helping parents understand why those ingredients were chosen in the first place. Now, no company can promise a completely contaminant-free food supply because naturally occurring elements exist throughout the environment. That's an agricultural reality affecting foods far beyond baby products. The difference lies in how companies respond. During our investigation, we placed significant value on manufacturers that publicly discuss testing programs, supplier selection, and continuous efforts to reduce contaminant exposure wherever reasonably possible. Serenity Kids stood out because it consistently emphasized those topics instead of relying solely on emotional marketing. That changes everything. Parents aren't simply buying convenience.
They're placing trust in the decisions a company makes long before the product reaches the shelf. The brands that communicate those decisions openly deserve meaningful recognition.
Number 1. Cerebelli. This was the biggest surprise of our investigation. Cerebelli isn't the oldest name in baby food, nor does it dominate supermarket shelves like some legacy brands. Yet the company impressed us with its strong emphasis on nutrition science, ingredient sourcing, and transparent communication. It also publicly discusses testing for heavy metals and has highlighted efforts to keep contaminant levels as low as reasonably achievable through careful sourcing and quality controls. Here's why that matters. Parents shouldn't have to assume a company is taking every reasonable precaution. The best companies actively explain what they're doing and why. In a category built entirely on trust, openness becomes one of the most valuable ingredients of all.
Here's what ultimately separated Cerebelli from every other brand we reviewed. Throughout this investigation, we kept returning to one question. If you were feeding your own child, which company gives you the clearest understanding of what's inside the package and how it got there? Cerebelli consistently performed well because it combined thoughtful formulations, nutritional focus, transparent communication, and public discussion of ingredient quality. Does that mean every product is perfect? No. No agricultural food can honestly make that claim. But among the brands we evaluated, Cerebelli demonstrated one of the strongest overall commitments to continuous improvement and helping parents make informed decisions, instead of asking them to rely on reputation alone.